All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Auditing and Reporting for System Integrity in Applied Epic. My name is Lauren Roberts, and I'm the Chief Agency Consultant here at Kite Technology Group. I'm joined today by Laura Whaley, Agency Consultant here at Kite Tech. We are so glad you've joined us today, and we're excited to be sharing today's content. Before we jump into today's topic, here's a little bit more information about Kite Technology Group. For those of you joining us for the first time today and not sure what Kite Technology is all about, we are a managed IT service provider and agency consulting firm serving independent insurance agencies and other businesses across the country. We've been around for more than 30 years now, and what sets Kite Tech apart from other IT providers is our expertise within the insurance industry. Listed here, you can see some of the IT and consulting services that we offer. We strive to help the organizations we partner with leverage technology so they can maximize their business performance. If you'd like to learn more about our services, please visit our website or send us a message, and we'd be happy to set up a time to chat. My name is Lauren Roberts, and I've been around here at Kite Technology for quite a while now. I started in agency consulting way back in 2016, 2017, years just blur before 2020. And before that, of course, I worked in insurance agencies in several different roles, which gave me an opportunity to be an agency consultant. And I've worked with several agencies over the years, helping with Epic migrations, as well as Epic optimization once you've been on Epic for a little while. I am the oddball, though, that does accounting too. So yes, weirdly enough, I like finding the problems in accounting and making sure that those get fixed too. I have a wonderful team of agency consultants here at Kite Tech, along with some outsourced bookkeepers. Laura, who is one of our wonderful servicing consultants, is here with us today. Sorry to confuse you on the names, but I am Lauren. She is Laura. So I'm going to pass it to Laura to go ahead and introduce herself as well.
All right. So as Lauren said, I'm Laura Whaley. I've been at Kite now for 3 years, just coming up on 3 years. Prior to that, I had over 20 years at an independent agency. Started in just commercial lines on the desk, like many of you, and then moved into a management role. Did Epic administration, helped agencies on board onto Epic along with my agency. And came over to Kite, and now that's my focus is optimizing and migrations with Epic. Everything except for accounting, I leave that to my teammates. So focused on everything else, workflows, but auditing is one of those. So that is what brings us here today.
So let's jump right into what are some of the things that we're going to be going over today. Of course, we want to talk about the importance of auditing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that first. We will go through the difference between some of the auditing methods that we have developed and helped agencies develop within their own agency over the years. Those including targeted auditing, annual performance reviews, as well as integrity audits for your data. We'll also talk about some best practices for using the reports that are within Epic, along with things like your dashboards. We'll talk about how to learn and analyze and evaluate the results of your audits as well, because it's really important for you to do something with that information once you have gathered that all for your agency. And then, of course, we'll touch on how to develop and implement some of those auditing methods for your agency. So we're going to start out by talking about why should you audit, right? That's one of the key items that you need to identify before you even get started in this process. So there's a lot of information that is going into your agency management system on a regular basis. And so some of those areas that you want to make sure are accurate would be things like your reporting. I know we say it in at least 75% of our webinars that garbage into Epic is going to equal garbage out of Epic. So it's very important for you to audit and identify that you have accurate information so that you also are able to get accurate reports that are going to help you run your business as an insurance agency. It's also really important to identify workflows and standardizing those workflows. Without standardized workflows and processes, it can be really difficult to see what everybody's doing. Of course, errors and omissions. That is one of the biggest ones that I think a lot of agencies forget about. And, of no fault of your own, you're just trying to do business, but that's one of those other things that we do need to make sure that we're focused on. It's also going to give you opportunity to do some training within the agency, as well as the ability to set up and perform performance reviews. So digging into that a little bit more, good data, of course, allows you to do analysis on your agency. So when you're thinking about things like growth and retention, when you have to have a discussion with a marketing rep and tell them, why you are writing more business or writing less business with them, you can't get that data out of Epic if it's not being properly entered into the system. Some of those reports that are going to be affected by bad data or missing data would be like your book of business reports. We like to lovingly call them Bob. I had someone the other day say, "What in the world is a monster Bob?" Well, that's a big old data report that we create, and we've lovingly dubbed it that over the years, but that's what Bob means as we go through this. But when you have things like missing premiums and commissions, you all of a sudden can't get information about the volume of business that's written with certain carriers, with producers, how much volume of premium and commission your account managers or CSRs are handling. And you can't see, things for maybe even performance. So it's really important to have certain data fields completed so that you can get that information out of Epic. Other things that we look at in that reporting information would be things like your budget or workload distribution. Do you have a CSR who is constantly saying they're overwhelmed, overwhelmed, overwhelmed? A lot of the information that's going into Epic, things like accurate activities, specific workflow activities, and also those premium and commission information, that's all going to affect what you can get out of Epic to see what is the actual bandwidth of that user in the system. So reporting is one of the biggest things. Obviously, we don't want to coach to just get reports out of the system, but as you know, that's something that's really important to running your agency. So it's definitely information you're going to need to have. One of the other items, of course, that has come up quite often lately has been errors and omissions. It's really important to audit what your users are doing because if you have established workflows and procedures, that's not going to be just enough on its own. You have to audit to ensure that the users are following those procedures and workflows that you have established in your agency. Consistency is really key in this process because if you have one user doing the workflow this way and one user doing it this way, it's going to be really hard to follow behind and figure out, what did go wrong? What happened? Did this renewal actually get processed? Did this vehicle actually get added that someone just accidentally had an accident in? So that's some of the really important information that you have to review in the system. And a lot of that is going to be manual. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail, but it is important to review that information. The last thing that you want to do is send out a certificate for a coverage that the client really doesn't have. So that's something that you really have to keep an eye on. Documentation is also extremely important in your system. So in addition to establishing those workflows and procedures, it's also important to audit to see that the documentation has been entered to show what is the story of this workflow. What information did we gather from the client? Did we follow through with this process? And without proper documentation in the system, you're not going to be able to follow that trail in the event that you do end up with some type of E&O exposure. But the goal here is to limit or eliminate E&O exposures, right, Laura? Yeah. All right. And of course, an E&O can exist due to something that an employee did individually, or a carrier, or even a workflow. So it is really important that you establish proper workflows in your agency because that, exposure could potentially come back on the workflow that you've established and the process that you are actually following in the system. All right. So speaking of workflows, it's also important to review those standardized workflows. Of course, you have to establish that first. It's going to be really hard to audit someone if they don't have a map to follow. You can't really go to somebody and say, here, you're doing this wrong if you didn't tell them how to do it in the first place. Kind of common sense, but I got to throw it out there. That's the purpose of this webinar. So of course, your standardized workflows though are going to improve efficiency. Your goal there is to improve efficiency for your staff, reduce those errors, and of course, enhance the consistency. Again, I should be able to come behind the last person that worked on this account, see what they did, follow what they did, and understand every part of the process that they completed. You are establishing those clear, repeatable processes so that there's limited possibility for a user to just kind of go out on their own and do their own thing. As long as you've established those processes, it should be a lot easier to go in and audit and see, yes, they did follow step A, B, C, D, E, F, G, versus they got over here and X, Y, Z and all over the place and whatever they shouldn't have been doing. And of course, your results hopefully will increase productivity and improve your resource utilization. A lot of times we see that agencies have invested a lot of money into InsurTech, things like your Indios, your Blue Butlers, all of those various programs, but not everybody's using those programs. And so, why are we spending so much money on this valuable tool that can increase efficiency, but it's not actually being used? So following an audit process is going to help you identify whether or not those procedures and tools are actually being used. One of the other things that an audit can provide you with is training opportunities. So there may be situations where you need to reevaluate a workflow. We mentioned earlier, a workflow could be a problem. So that's going to give you an opportunity to review that and possibly modify that workflow so that it is more efficient. You get better data accuracy out of that process. But it could potentially provide an opportunity for you to retrain your staff. If you're auditing on a regular basis and identifying things that users may be struggling with or have challenges with, or maybe they just don't want to do the right way, that unfortunately is the pessimistic side of things, but it happens. In that situation, you have the opportunity to train, give them the opportunity to improve their processes, follow the workflows, and ensure that everyone really is on the same page as far as that workflow is concerned. We definitely recommend exploring all of your options when it comes to your training. Do virtual training, that's certainly an option. You can do recordings for those as well. In person is always great if you do have the ability to have folks in your office. And then of course, you can also provide those workflows and have your users do some self-study or some additional homework as a part of that process by utilizing things like your demo database. Right, the last one, as far as these types of audits are concerned, is going to be your performance reviews. Now, a performance review is a little bit different from just your regular data auditing and following the workflows and things like that. This is typically going to be, your end of year performance review, identifying things that are a little bit more complex than just the standard day-to-day. Of course, a lot of the other pieces that we've discussed throughout this webinar so far can be included in that performance review. As long as you've documented that throughout the year, that's going to give you the ability to address those items during that performance review as well, identify any areas that they've improved in those specific workflows. But it's definitely going to include things like your past year goals. Maybe your agency, hopefully your agency has established some key values and core behaviors within your agency. So you can identify ways that your employee has actually followed and adhered to those values or shown those behaviors that you expect. Think about things like your sales goals. If you have a producer or even an account manager that has responsibility for cross-selling, those are things that you're going to want to go through in a lot more detail and review at the end of the year. And typically, these items are things that are going to affect maybe an annual bonus at the end of the year as well, or even just a pay increase. So performance review is the big overall umbrella that's going to encompass many of these other areas that you may also be performing at the end of the year. All right, and with that, Laura, I am going to pass it on to you for our types of auditing in the next slide that's coming up as I'm driving.
So Lauren's given you all of the background on why we should audit, but let's talk about the types of auditing. So first thing is I always like to recommend following some best practices when it comes to auditing. And these best practices really apply for any type of auditing that you're going to do. First and foremost, you need to make sure that the workflows have been documented and trained on previously. As Lauren mentioned, it's not real fair of you to go to a employee and say you're doing this wrong, when either A, there's no formal documented workflow, or if they have not been trained. In the haste of Corona time, we had pretty high turnover in most agencies. And a lot of that was done just peer to peer, just because we were not in the office. So you want to make sure that that training has happened and has been done properly. The next thing is that you definitely want to communicate to your staff. That auditing is going to start happening so that it's not of any surprise to them. But the second piece of that is, what are you auditing and how are you auditing? At one point, my agency in my old life did audits, and we just knew there was audits coming, and that seems so daunting, right? You're going to be reviewed and graded, but you don't know on what or how. That is fundamental. Outline what exactly you're going to be auditing and how you're going to be scoring those people. Giving them that clear expectation takes away all of the anxiety behind it. It doesn't leave any gray areas for misinterpretation or, grading someone one way in one circumstance, and yet someone else is getting a different rate in a different circumstance, but with the same results. And then the final piece of that is that we definitely want to analyze and address the results timely. So you do all of the auditing, and then what? You need to take those audit results and really dig into them and analyze what's come out of those. And so some of those analysis could result in that you need to look at either reworking your workflow, or you need to do some training, or it could be that you just have a personnel issue with a particular employee. So definitely take the time. Don't just do the audit and say, okay, here's your grade, and then wait until the next audit. Definitely make sure that you're looking at those results and making some determination on what those are telling you, so that you can properly address any of the issues that the audits are telling you. All right. So with that, now that we've outlined our best practices, we've kind of outlined all of the types of auditing into 3 categories. We have the annual performance review, which everyone's familiar with. I don't care what line of work you're in. Everyone gets that annual review, typically around end of year, right before they give you your raise for the next year. But that's done annually, and you're looking at an entire year of work in that case. They're going back over 12 months or so, looking at how you've performed. There's a lot of facets to that annual review. It does usually take a lot of time because you are looking at so many things, and you're going back over 12 months. So it's not just a short period of time you're looking at, it's a very extensive time frame. Next to that, you've got your targeted auditing. Targeted auditing is something that I highly believe in. This is taking a regular interval audit, and typically either monthly or quarterly. But you're going to take a look at specific workflows, and not all workflows, not an account level, not a person level, but you're going to look at just some specific workflows and review work that's been done in that last time frame. So if you're doing monthly audits, you're going to look for the last 30 days. Quarterly, it's going to be the last quarter. So that's a little bit different than the performance review, because you're looking at a smaller time frame and you're looking at more specific workflows. You're not looking at an entire person's workload. The last one is your data integrity. Data integrity usually is done again monthly or quarterly, just depending on how often you have your frequency set up. And this one is really going to focus on data that's been entered into the system. And you're going to analyze that through reports or dashboards. So the data integrity really is looking at the information that's in the system. How accurate is the information that we have? Whether it's people, premiums, companies, whatever the case is, and is that information accurate? So data integrity feeds into your targeted auditing, which when in combination of month over month or quarter after quarter, can help you with that annual performance review. All right. So now that we've gone through the types, let's take a look a little bit closer at that annual performance review. So again, as I said, the annual performance review is really going to be 12 months. Annual performance review does not just look at work performed, although it is work performed. It will also include things like behaviors and values of that employee. So is that person easy to work with? Are they, do they have pleasant disposition? Do they show up for work on time? All of those are going to go into a performance review. You also might include in that things like sales goals or cross-selling goals, as well as any client surveys or feedback that you've gotten. So not only is it important to know, is that employee pleasant to work with internally, but of course, our number one goal is to keep happy clients. So how are they doing with our clients? What is that feedback? So annual performance review is everything on that employee. What are they doing in all facets of work life? The next one is going to be that targeted auditing. Oh, sorry, I gave you a screenshot here of what an annual performance review would look like. So again, we've got some performance items at the top. Again, these are high level, indicators of how are they doing, how are they performing. So we've got employee performance at the top. We've got some job behaviors down below. Again, how easy are they to work with? Are they working well with others? Do they volunteer to do other things? And then actually at the bottom, we've included one about employee potential. So do they have the potential to grow? Or are they more of a short-term promotion type of employee? These generally are a strongly agree, disagree. And again, these are a lot of, I will say these are more gray area or subjective ways of evaluating someone versus, I think now we're ready for the next one, which I was ready to talk about, is that targeted auditing. So again, targeted auditing is more specific to your type of workflow performed. I rotate when I train on these, I rotate from topic to topic, again, month to month or quarter to quarter, depending on how frequent you're going to be doing them. So you're going to pick certain workflows. You're going to look at how those workflows are being performed by that employee. And again, you're going to have very clear expectation of what that grading is going to look like. So often like a 0 to 3 scale, what is a 0, what is a 3, so that those employees know what the expectation is. Again, with targeted auditing, because these are workflow specific, the analysis piece of this really is going to give you an idea of if you have issues with a workflow, a workload distribution, or if training's needed. So if you're looking at analysis and you see that your agency as a whole is underscoring in a particular workflow, you need to dig down into that workflow and decide, is it because the workflow does not work for us? And it could be for many reasons. It could be for personnel reasons. It could be workload reasons. It could be technology reasons. If the workflow is written properly and it should be working, then why isn't it working? So again, do we have a problem with a team? Maybe workload is too heavy. We need to do a hire. Maybe we just need to shift some resources. All right. So from targeted auditing, then we can move into our I've got a screenshot of a targeted auditing. And this is just one of the samples that I do. And again, these are, you'll see in the black, this one in particular was an audit done on endorsements. And so in black is what we were looking for. We were looking for, was the request documented and confirmed to the insured? Were endorsements processed timely? Were proper activities used? Those are all the key points that we were looking for in that workflow. Again, you can get very granular, but the more that you pick out that you're going to have to audit, again, you're going to need to create that grade scale. So I like to keep it very basic, create those buckets, usually 5 points, and again, setting it up on a score of 0 to 3. I do always provide audit notes back. So I like to tell that employee what I'm seeing. So is there good documentation? Yes, great job with your documentation. Were endorsements processed timely? Yes, they were done within 5 days. That's the agency's expectation. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. In another circumstance where you'll see down under cancellations and reinstatements, the question was, were proper activities used? And I have a note there, insured's request to cancel on Bob's construction was not processed per the workflow. So when I'm looking at that, I'm not able to see the activities that I was expecting. That employee might have went outside of that workflow. And again, that's where I'm going to be able to glean some insight into, do I just need training to happen, or is there a workflow issue?
And another thing, Laura, just to kind of add on to that, I have seen in some cases where agencies like to even add a screenshot of certain things, when it comes to things like, are their activities up to date? Of course, you can run a report for some of those things as well, but sometimes folks like to add a screenshot just so you can refer back to that just quickly and easily within that audit.
Yes. And there's a couple of questions in chat. One is, this form provides a summary of everything reviewed. I will say that this particular one was just a monthly audit. So these were the audits that were targeted for that month, and I would cover everything that was audited. So I do provide the employee, what accounts did I audit and notes on them, like Lauren had mentioned. I'm giving them screenshots so they can actually see and not just take my word or a summary note of what was found. And Lisa has asked, how many workflows per account manager do you audit? And again, this is really going to depend on the resources that you have internally and the frequency that you do the targeted auditing. Generally, I recommend once a month auditing 2 workflows plus activities. I always look at pending activities because that's going to give me an idea of if that person is on target as far as their follow-ups go or not. It's not just workflow specific, but it's how is that person doing managing their workload. So that gives us a little different insight. Now I can typically see if an employee starts to slide on being caught up on those activities or not. If there's just a workload balance, maybe that person needs some assistance, you can jump in and help before you have those E&O issues or servicing issues. So again, it's going to be up to the agency on what different workflows you want to audit. I would say create that list of workflows that you want to audit. And again, that's going to be over the year. And then once you have that list complete, then you can back that out into, are we going to do this monthly or quarterly? And so how frequently are you going to be auditing? If you're doing a monthly, typically I say there's 5 or 6 workflows that you can do pretty easily. Cost 12 months. That means you could do them both twice a year. So just kind of do a round robin on topics. I generally don't tell them what I'm auditing on. I like to just tell them, here's all of the things that are going to be audited. Here's how we're auditing you. And then each month you take a random workflow and audit that workflow.
All right, awesome. And it looks like we're good on questions for now, so we can keep going. All right. There we go.
So the last piece is that data integrity piece. And again, we mentioned that most often you're utilizing reports, and the reports are going to allow you to verify whether the information and the data in the system is accurate and complete. Things like checking policies to look at application detail is something that you can't run out of report, but it's still very important to that data integrity. So, is the information that we have on the application accurate? Because as Lauren mentioned before, that's the information that's going to pull to your certificate or your evidence of insurance. So you don't want information being entered wrong there and then being transferred onto things like proofs or proposals, even at the renewal time.
Mhm.
So you really want to identify what areas you want to be looking at that need to be consistently accurate. So things like your premiums, your commissions, commission percentages, PRBRs. Do we have the right people in servicing roles? Do we have old employees listed in there? All of those are extremely important because those are what is going to drive our reports for things like production and paying commissions to producers and things like activities are configured based on servicing roles a lot of times. So if we're looking to automate an activity to the account manager, we want to make sure that the person listed in the account manager field is a current active employee. So deciding what fields are really important to make sure are accurate, and then finding those reports that you can audit those fields on. So we have a list of reports.
Yes. Oh, I just have to clarify something real quick because Laura kind of made it sound like we make sure we have the right people in servicing roles, like right people, right seat. So I just want to clarify that when we're looking at that report, we're looking to make sure that we don't have a whole bunch of old employees because that is one thing that we see very, very often when we're performing assessments for agencies. Especially, we'll pull up an activity report and we're like, oof, Bob's got some really, really old activities and a whole lot of them. Like Bob hasn't been here in like 5 years. So so just to clarify, a little comedy there. That's my joke for the day. Not right people, right seat. Just let's not have any old employees in your system. Making sure. All right. So yes, Laura has, we did make a nice little list of some of the reports that you can use to review some of the data in your system. And Laura, I'm just going to jump in here real quick on this since I already started talking. Some of the things like your activity analysis reports, if you don't see those in your system, do make sure that you have the most up-to-date report pack in Applied Epic. There's a very cool report called the Activity Analysis Report by Who Owner. And then there's also one for an open activities analysis. That one's really cool to show you things like how long are, the average open times for these activities. So if you maybe have somebody that's just rolling an activity over forever and ever and ever, they're not ever closing it and starting a new one. You can see some of that information. What's the average overdue, time as far as the follow-up dates are concerned. So are your folks actually staying on top of those follow-up dates and using those as their to-dos? Activity analysis, and both of these reports have some great summary reports as well. So, we talked earlier about bandwidth and things like, does this person have the bandwidth, or do they maybe have too much work? As long as you've got good activity codes and good workflows that show, this activity is this type of work, then it's a lot easier to see on that summary, how many of those workflow type activities that user has. When it comes to things like, an add attachment activity, that doesn't tell me anything. That tells me that you dragged and dropped something into Epic. So, really working through those workflows and activities to ensure that it's saying, here's what that person did. A renewal activity means a whole lot more to me than an add attachment activity. So I'm just kind of doing a good analysis of that information, total volume, and then also the type of work that they're doing. We talked earlier about the book of business reports and things like your expiration reports. Those are policy-based reports that are going to, allow you to open up a lot of data fields and see, are there areas in the book of business that we're missing data? We need to look at that a little bit more in depth and get that information over to the staff to ensure that they're filling that out completely. One of our, Lorraine in our chat or Q&A asked about required fields for things like line estimated commission. That's where you may also use some of the tools in Epic to configure and require information or desire information that you're having some issues with getting completed, and you're finding that on your reports. Of course, there's the expiration report or the expired not renewed report. Hopefully you're all using the wonderful renewals manager, but this is also, kind of a backup report that you could use to see, are we missing any renewals? Is this something that's happening consistently? Was the policy actually renewed, but somebody didn't follow the workflow the right way? So lots of different variables that you can identify there. And then, of course, for things like, your accounting, you've got policies with no transactions. There's going to be an agency bill report and a direct bill report for those. You can see whether or not your users are actually following the workflows and putting in agency bill transactions in a timely fashion or on the right policy. Yeah, I run into that one a lot. And you can see some of that same information on the direct bill report as well. You're just going to run those a little bit differently. Another really, really important one, especially if you're using your renewals manager, is going to be things like your in process and submitted service summary row reports. So when it comes to those items, if you have a policy that was never taken from inception out of in process, that policy is not going to show up in your renewals manager. So that could very well be a missed renewal if you're using that renewals manager on a regular basis. So you want to use reports like those to identify whether or not we have things in those service summary rows in those stages for too long, or if they're just not being moved properly. Laura, anything to add on that? I'm sure you
Nope.
have. All
Yeah.
good. Okay. And these are just a few of the reports that are available for reviewing information in Epic. I know we're kind of focusing primarily on servicing today and auditing your servicing staff, but there are plenty of accounting reports as well that you can use for checks and balances and auditing on the general ledger side too. So don't forget about your accounting folks and, administration, things like claims. There's a lot of other data out there, but there's not enough time in the universe to go through all of those in one webinar. So we're gonna keep moving on, just giving you some good ideas and want to get your brain going to be thinking about what do you want to start auditing. Right, dashboards, back to you, Laura.
Okay.
I love that I have the accounting expertise and some of my other staff has expertise in other areas, and Laura and Jenny have done a great job at exploring the dashboard. So she's going to take this one.
Yeah. So dashboard right now comes with any agency that has analytics. You do have the ability to turn on dashboards. Dashboards has recently gained some good advancements in the technology that's being used on dashboards. We've been doing some monthly items in our newsletter, so those resources are out there if you guys are interested. We've got some great articles where we've started exploring each of the dashboards that are out there by role. We're just making our way through. It's going to be a series of articles there, but feel free to follow us with those. But your dashboards really are a great way to analyze information very quickly without actually getting in and running some reports. The dashboards that you have that are available are by role, they're role based. And so each role has their own specific insights. So it's going to be insights that are relevant to you in your specific role. So, for example, a department manager is going to have their own set of dashboard modules. And if you look at that and compare that to someone as operations manager or even IT, their dashboard is going to look much different. However, I will say that each one really has a really good, there's a data quality piece of it. And each one really has a good insight to different parts of the system. So for your department manager, a couple things to point out. Department manager dashboard gives you, you'll see in the top screenshot, data confidence score by data source. So when you're looking at activities and work efforts, that score is at 100%. We were doing really good in our demo database. Versus policy and line level, we're just above a 50%. So what gives us that, that score? And you can look to the right of that and you can look at data deficiencies. So you can see the top two: activity records with invalid employees or lines in effect with invalid servicing employees. We have 0 invalid records out of a total. So that's why we're at 100%. Versus policies in effect with no billed commission or no billed premium, we're at a very high number there. There's more data deficiencies there in that list, but that's the one that I grabbed for you. So you can see how they're going to get to that score. What's super nice about dashboards is that you can drill into any of these figures and it'll actually give you the data behind that. So underneath there is the second dashboard that you can see as a department manager. And that one is a work performed dashboard. And so you can see number of activities created, tasks created, notes created, activities closed, tasks closed, and attachments created. So one of the big things lately is, are people following naming conventions on attachments? You can actually click on that module and then it'll show you the attachments or the data that's behind that number 10. So in our demo database, we have 10 attachments that were made. You can see who made them and the description that went with each of them. You can download any of this information into a spreadsheet, so you can take it, highlight it, make pivot tables out of it. Super, super helpful, especially when it comes to cleanup. So if you see things that are not being done correctly or need to be updated, you can download that report and send it out to your account managers to be updated. So the dashboards are super helpful. They update in real time as your system is updating, your data is going to update. You can change some of the filters and ways that the information is displayed on these. So depending on how your agency is working, you might need to do that. Lauren, do you want to add anything here?
Yes, I'm going to pause for a couple of questions. Brian has a question about what does an employee see on their dashboard, specifically a CSR. That is something that you would configure their role for and configure itself under that user. So it's really going to kind of depend on what you give them access to. High level overview of that dashboard, Laura. Or shall we direct Brian in the interest of time to that wonderful article that is coming out or has come out?
I will say, from what I recall, I know that the employee can see upcoming renewals that have not been renewed, as well as missed renewals. Those are two really key things. You can also see past due activities. So again, their focus is going to be mainly on their day-to-day work. And are you jumping in for us?
To not into the dashboard,
Okay.
but to where to configure, because we just had another question about that.
So what Lauren is going to show you is you're going to go into the configuration on the user level, and that's where you're going to assign that person right there in the middle. There's dashboard access, and you basically can give everyone the ability to have dashboards with download or without. So if you want to be able to allow them to download that information, that's going to be the key there. There's one other item in there, which is asset builder. That would only be for like an admin person. You only get one of those per agency. Right underneath that's your user personalization, and you can check off what roles that person it applies to. So if they're principal owner, you would check principal owner. Nice thing about principal owner is they do get to see everything. So they get one real specific principal owner look, but they can open and look at other into other visible areas. The other ones are specific. So if you give someone account, they only see what's available on the account dashboard. And again, our articles do cover what's in each of those. Our very first article looked at the roles and what items are available in each of those. And then as we're working through that series, we're looking at each one a little more in depth, but that's where you would go in to add it per employee. Once you set that here, then the employee on the home base will see dashboards over off to the side in their navigation pane. They click on that, and then that gives them their default view of whatever their dashboard is set at.
Very good. All right, we have also a question from Jerry. Hey, Jerry, I'm not actually in Dallas. I'm in North Carolina. But thanks for the for that compliment there. Yeah, I'm Texan. I have been accused of being Texan before too. It's the accent, right? Uh, so, oh, for the summit last month. See, I love this Q&A. Like we're trying to figure out what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Anyways, so with the question Jerry has, have we heard that dashboards will replace reporting? So not necessarily. The reports in Epic will always be there. Those are your key basic reports, and a lot of this information is just to see that from a nice high level overview. I believe analytics will, maybe be phased out over time. That dashboards is a little bit more streamlined way to see that information and data. But none of that is confirmed. Definitely reach out to your applied rep to confirm any dates or timeframes on any of that type of information. So, yes, that's what I have for that. I wish I was in Dallas, just saying. All right, so then we also have a quick question about how about producers? What are we auditing for them? And I think that really depends on how your producers are working in the system. What workflows have you established for those producers? And then of course, when it comes to things like your performance goals, those are things that are going to be included in your, maybe monthly, quarterly reviews, and then definitely in, an annual performance review. Not all producers are working the same. We know that that's the nature of the beast when it comes to sales. I know too, because I have to do sales too. So, the expectations may be a little bit different. Obviously, we highly recommend that you standardize the procedures for your workflow for your producers as well. If they're required to utilize things like the opportunities in Epic, you want to make sure that you are auditing things like their activities, their documentation. Are you requiring them to attach documentation in Epic, label it certain ways, things like that? But it really is going to depend on what that workflow process is for the producers that you have established. And again, definitely review that for consistency and standardization as much as possible. Okay, we have a couple of other questions we'll answer real quick before we move on. We do have about 12 minutes left. Just to let you guys know, we want to make sure we get to all of the questions that we have today. So we will go over a little bit, so hang around with us if you can. And if not, don't forget this is recorded, so you can always come back and watch us later. So Maria has a great question. What is your thought about all account managers having the department manager view, and they can see the state of the department and help each other out, or see if they're falling behind compared to the team? That really is going to be dependent on your opinion and what the dynamic is of your team. Definitely think that's awesome to look at that and say, we want to make sure that we're all holding each other accountable as peers. That's fantastic. However, I would say that there should be someone that has ownership of that. So, definitely having a department manager to review that data and see, here's who is actually falling behind or whatever the case is. But of course, best practice recommendation would be, let's just make sure that this person has the data for themselves, because it may also be a little overwhelming. So that's another thing to just kind of keep in mind there. Good question. All right, Laura is typing the answer to the next one. So I will, did you want to say it out loud too?
I'm going to check on this and get back to Jocelyn. Asset Builder is quickly evolving, so not sure exactly where they're at on this one, but I will check on that and get back with you.
Perfect. Very good. So I'll let her continue to type her answer, and I will jump in on the next slide. So hopefully we can get through this on time. See, I promised before we started this meeting that since Laura was here, we would end on time. But since Lauren is here, we might not end on time. All right. So once you have established these auditing processes, think whether it's the targeted auditing, your data review, reports, your performance reviews, whatever the case is, it is extremely important that you do something with that information. You do not want to, at least I wouldn't want to go through the process of establishing workflows and procedures, training all of my staff to do all of that information, developing the auditing process, going through accounts, going through reports, and then just not do anything with that. So that is one place that is going to be really important in this process for you to follow through. Deliver this information to your staff. Make sure that you've clearly defined what results you're looking for. Laura mentioned in the targeted auditing, for example, that there's a scale of 1 to 3. Okay, is 1 the best? Is 3 the best? Which one is it? So make sure you're defining the parameters around what you're looking for, where you're expecting your staff to be. She says establish acceptable standards. That means we don't expect everyone to be perfect, right? So if you're just falling a little bit, that's okay. I'm going to remind you of that. But if you're falling way behind, I might need you to go through some refresher training. And that's exactly the purpose of something like the targeted auditing, is to, identify, we need to actually do some training to get folks up to date and refreshed on this process, and give them a chance to understand that workflow in more detail, or how to process it properly. Also, make sure that you're recording the results of your audits in a way that are cumulative and easy to compare over things like your team, your department, or the agency. If you've got different personal lines teams folks are kind of working together, or whatever the case is, can we compare that information? Can we compare the performance of commercial lines to the performance of personal lines? Do we have some broken processes over here, but maybe we were doing better over here? And then, of course, the agency as a whole, how are we progressing? Because that's really your goal here. And I think that's really important to convey to your staff as well, to say, we're not just doing this because we want to be like the IRS and find you something that you did wrong, right? We're looking at this as, how can we improve the agency as a whole? And improving the agency as a whole doesn't just benefit the agency, that also benefits you as an employee. We're looking to help you be more efficient. If we're more profitable, you're more profitable, right? So there's a lot of ways that this really promotes some positivity, as long as you're conveying this information in the right way. It doesn't always have to be a bad thing. I've said that for years when it comes to audits. Make sure you're paying close attention to trends. Like Laura said previously, when we're looking at things like workflows, if we're consistently getting negative audits, or whatever the case is, in a specific workflow area, maybe that's not a problem with the people or the personnel. Maybe that's a problem with the workflow itself. Or if we have folks that are consistently falling behind on their activities, is this because they're not following up on their activities, or is it because they've got so much work that they can't maintain all of their activities? So some of those trends are things that you'll be able to identify by establishing this auditing process and going through these things. Another thing to keep in mind is you may identify a trend that you need to audit. So let's say, for example, you're consistently missing a certain type of coverage on your umbrella policies, or whatever the case is. That's something that you're not going to get out of a report. So you need to establish a method of auditing that information to ensure that you are covered, and limiting those E&O exposures, right? Don't forget. But that may be something that just pops up. You find that out of nowhere, all of a sudden we realize we're starting to have a problem with X, Y, and Z. So really important to make sure that you are looking at those trends that are happening in your agency, and you may develop auditing processes just from issues that you have. Don't forget, have an action plan ready for your results. Like I said, make sure that you're relaying this information to your staff. So set up a time that you're going to meet with them. Don't just send the information over to them and say, here's your audit. Like, it's really important for you to discuss this information with your staff member and explain how important it is. Give them an opportunity to ask questions. And what are you going to do after this? Are we going to make you go through training? Or did you do well? Are you going to now peer train somebody else because you did so well? There's lots of different options there. All right. And I'm sure we have a couple more questions. We are almost all set. So we're going to finish up in the last few minutes. might be on time, might not. Ask more questions so I can go over and hold my promise. Um, so it's time to get started. Once you have decided on, the way that you want to audit your employees, don't forget, you need to make sure that those workflows are established and clearly defined first. We've got to make sure that users are trained on the processes and the workflows that you've established. Don't forget, workflows are also going to go hand in hand with your configuration in Epic. So you want to make sure that you have workflows established, but also, maybe things that are going to put some little bumpers, like the little bowling bumpers around things that your staff are going to do too. Think about things like field defaults in activity descriptions. So we don't have to have users typing naming conventions in. Thinking about, saving them some clicks on whether an activity should be successful or unsuccessful. We've talked about required and desired fields. I am all about required desired fields 100% all day long. I have told this corny joke 1,000 times, but if you require something on a Friday, maybe there was an update that happened over the weekend, and it's just required now. So another option for you, but no, I'm just kidding. I kid. If you are going to require a field, make sure you let your staff know that that is a required field now, because it could actually cause a little bit of stress and trouble in their process. Some required fields will, if they're not completed, will kind of wipe out other changes that you've made. So be careful about that. We already talked about making sure that you target any known issues that you have first. Let's get some cleanup done. Let's make sure that we round out any issues that are occurring right now, whether, again, that's workflows or we just have things that aren't getting completed properly. Make sure you set your reports up. Don't forget that we have scheduled reports available in Epic. So you can set it and forget it, as far as, don't forget it for real, but but set it and forget that you have to manually run it anymore, as far as those reports are concerned. And you don't have to be, as the administrator, operations person, department manager, you don't have to be the only one looking at that report. You can see that report from your level, but don't hesitate to also deliver that to the staff member themselves and give them a little bit of empowerment over completing processes, updating data fields, things like that. If you feel like they're getting a little report overload necessarily, you can maybe consider putting some of those reports in their report quick view. So let's say, for example, at the beginning of the month, I give my staff person a list of all of the policies missing agency commission last month. I need you to go complete these. Well, we could drop that report in their email one time, but give them access to that report in that report quick view too, so they can check and see what their progress is. Also decide if you're going to do this internally or if you're going to outsource this to someone else. There are lots of great resources out there for you to utilize for auditing workflows, procedures, policy checking. We didn't talk about that one, but that's also an opportunity for you to make sure the applications are getting completed properly as well. So, if you are going to audit internally, make sure you have the resources and the staff to do that. And then, of course, always there's plenty of options for outsourcing. Laura, anything to add there? I see that we are all out of questions.
And we are right at the top of the hour.
What? Jocelyn's got another question. All right. It's a good question about scheduling reports. Ooh, one thing to note, I'm going to add there on scheduling reports is it's really important to add a little bit of an interval of time in between the scheduling of each of your reports. So let's say, for example, you have a missed renewals report running at 6:55 a.m. You may want to push that next report to 7 a.m. Maybe put a little 5-minute interval in between those two to kind of give Epic a chance to catch up. You may make a larger interval if you feel like it's taking longer. Like, do yourself, I would go in and do some testing, click run on that report, see how long it actually takes to process, and then maybe you gauge your interval in between that schedule on that information. So might take a couple of tries, a couple of tweaks to get that information just right.
I will say too, looking at your question, some of the concern around that is the types of policies or structure that you have in there. You may want to consider using an exclude versus an include on those. So, for example, if you're trying to run, I'm just going to use this very generically, new business in commercial lines, rather than using commercial lines and listing all your profit centers, knowing that those profit centers might change, you may want to just exclude a department of personal and EB and leave that would leave then anything in commercial, including any profit centers that would apply in that structure. So maybe look at when you are doing your criteria, consider using the exclude versus the include. Because as you're adding things or changing things, that might be a better answer.
Yeah, awesome. Jean loves your response there.
Been there, done
Uh,
that. That's how I knew.
all right, so we have one more question from Deb, and then if anybody else has some additional questions, we'll hang around for a couple more minutes. We'll probably shut it down after these last two that we have, though, so we can let everybody get back to their day. So Deb has a great question. She's been doing auditing in-house, wondering what resources available for outsourcing. Not considered that before. So I know that I had an agency a while back they outsource their auditing to Resource Pro. So that's one that I definitely know will do that. However, there are lots of other resources out there. Think of any VA company that's available. You've got folks like Marblebox, CoverDesk, Laura, add to the list. Those are the top two in my head. Patra, Waves.
There's a couple out there. If you need help setting up audits, you could call Kite, or Applied has a lot of resources too out on Applied Network. In the network, if you jump out there and Google the word auditing, there's some things out there in the forums. Some of it is a little dated. I went out there recently just to see what we had out there. Some of it's a couple years old, so may not be the most recent, but a good resource there as well.
Time to go start you a new thread. I'm sure lots of folks have the same questions. It is users helping users. So I'm sure a lot of folks would be happy to share some of their experiences, especially with some of the VAs. I noticed a chat just the other day about, who are you using right now for outsourcing, and lots of different folks piped in on that. So I love that resource because it's folks who have actually used those specific companies. So great feedback that you'll get there too, and some recommendations. All right, last question from Dan. Do you know of a good validation report or process to ensure the producer setup on the policy screen is the same as under the account detail? Ooh, Laura, I feel like that's a VLOOKUP.
I was going to say, I don't know that a report will do it, just because you have your account level report and your policy level report. Some of the reports you can pull in both levels. Not sure if that would be one that you could just pull in that field or not. However, Excel is wonderful for that. So if you ran the two reports, had your account report with your servicing roles and your policy report with your servicing roles, you could do a VLOOKUP to ensure that they were the same. So a couple ways to get there, but
yes, absolutely. Good. See, I knew that was coming. They're the spreadsheet queens too. When it comes to VLOOKUP, I'm like, let me get Laura or Jenny for you.
yeah.
Not my forte. All right, folks. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. Here are a few ways if you are looking for some help with your agency with Applied Epic. These are some of the different resources or different services that we offer. We do assist with the migration process. We act as a liaison for you and your agency with Applied Epic. We also do lots of optimizations. If you have been on Applied Epic for a while, we do have some outsourced bookkeeping, accounting support, workflows, audit development. Yep. And then, of course, we do some employee training and proposals and custom forms as well. So a couple of other things before you guys go. We do have some upcoming webinars, so be sure to check these out. You can sign up, of course. There's a fantastic little QR code here, or you can find this information on our website. And last but not least, if you are interested in learning about any of Kite Tech's IT and consulting services, Please feel free to reach out to us using any of the ways listed here. We would be happy to set up a complimentary consultation to talk with you about your agency's technology or consulting needs. Don't forget, you will receive a follow-up email that will include today's recording in a few days, but again, you can also access it under the resources tab on our website or on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you see all of the latest, greatest new things. Just a reminder to please take a minute to complete our survey. We would really appreciate your feedback. And thank you again so much for spending time with us today. We hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.